Good morning. It is June 21st, 2024, and we are in the middle of our hottest stretch in Ohio, probably since 2020, I think, according to Dr. Gardner. It has been at least minimally warm, might be the best way to describe it. Online today, we've got Dr. Dave Gardner, Dr. Xiaowei Wu, and Dr. Tyler Carr. Um, and first up, Dr. Wu talking about insects.
Good morning, everyone. Today I would like to share some updates on the Japanese beetles and moss chafers. So you may have noticed about these beetles flying around, especially Japanese beetles in the daytime and moss chafers at dusk and in the evenings. And I also noticed a Japanese beetle feeding on my roads in my front yard in a few days ago. So these numbers are on increase, and I expect to peak in the next few weeks. So if you notice good numbers of adults flying around, especially you have a history of white grub infestation in your lawn, you may consider putting out preventative applications. For example, on diamides or neonicotinoid insecticides, those are good options. And the treatments can be applied from now to mid-August. Of course, last time Dr. Dave Shatner mentioned about the residual activities of the different products, and some chemicals have longer residual than others. For example, arena and the diamides, the acyclovir and the trino, they can last about 3 months, and some others like imidacloprid and can have about a bit over 2 month activities. So these insecticides can be applied from now to mid-August for preventative control. Also, and you may notice that there are some Japanese beetle traps available. I would suggest that this trap should be used for monitoring purpose only, should not be used for control of the beetles, the insects, because you are attracting the beetles from your neighborhood into your lawn, and not every beetles are catch. Only some proportion of the beetles are are caught into the traps. There are more actually flying around, so they can concentrate in that area and cause damage. Of course, if you set up one, your neighbor may be very happy about that because you are taking their beetles away. So that's what I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. Welcome and back to the stable, the thoroughbred on weeds and herbicides, Dr. Gardner.
All right, good afternoon, morning, whenever it is that you're actually watching this recording. Let's see. So I've been away for a little while, with apologies, but I came in at 6 o'clock this morning to start a couple of protocols because the protocol said start this trial on June 21st. So I was like, okay, but generally speaking, when the weather is like this, it's not a great idea to spray herbicides. And even at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's like you could just kind of imagine the herbicide rising off of the plots, which means that it wasn't going to actually stay around to control the weeds. Now, that's probably being melodramatic, but my point is that when the temperature goes above 80 degrees, it's generally not a good idea to be spraying herbicides. Yeah, actually, with the weather the way that it has been, it's probably not a good idea to be applying much of anything right now. But, do especially be careful with herbicide applications when we have weather conditions like what we're experiencing. Now, I've said for the last couple of years that we're starting to see an increase in herbicide-resistant buckhorn plantain, and I worry that the perception is that I'm just being melodramatic for the sake of trying to make it seem like I'm relevant. But sure enough, I'm starting to get emails with photographs that look like this, where somebody reports that they sprayed a herbicide and it controlled all of the weeds but the buckhorn plantain. So what to do? Well, haloxyfen methyl was released a couple of years ago, one of the active ingredients in Game On, and it is active on herbicide-resistant plantain. The problem is that it's not registered for residential use. If you're not on residential areas, then that would be the one that I would attempt to use first. If you're on residential lawns, then you might try something like tenacity. Mesotrione is the active ingredient, or there are a couple of group 2 or ALS inhibiting herbicides that are available for use in turf. Most of these we use for sedge control, for example, Archon, the new liquid formulation of pyrimesulfan. If you look at the label, buckhorn plantain is on the label. Some of the other ALS inhibitors that are registered for turf, like flurazulam or Defender, buckhorn plantain isn't on the label, and then panoxylim's a little hot on some of our cool season grasses. So, the options here are the ones that I would recommend to try if you are experiencing that issue. Earlier this spring, I made a comment about how I get a lot of grass samples, and if it isn't the usual suspects like quackgrass, orchard grass, or et cetera, they tend to be temporary guests in our turf environments. And when I have people send me a sample because I can't identify it by photograph or using morphology, then I grow it out in the greenhouse to get a seed head. And sure enough, a couple of them that I got this year were either Timothy or volunteer wheat. And probably these came in when somebody used straw or hay in a seeding operation last fall. But Timothy will persist for a while in turf, but in this part of the country tends to not be a long-term performer, and volunteer wheat would be an annual. But as far as the grasses that we do actually concern ourselves with, I would say that they're way ahead of schedule compared to normal years. So this was yellow foxtail in bloom in a landscaping bed almost 3 weeks ago. So, if you're thinking about controlling grassy weeds and you were planning on sticking to the schedule that you usually do, just know that they're, about 1 to 2 weeks ahead of schedule compared to normal. And also bear in mind that most of our crabgrass herbicides are most effective when the crabgrass is nice and visible, 4 to 6 tiller and just starting to go to seed. The herbicides that we have for crabgrass are phenoxaprop, quinclorac, and then mesotrione and tepramazone also have activity. Quinclorac is the one that is used by far and away the most often, but I would caution people that I took this data a long time ago, but it never changes. What I'm showing here is that if you apply it to young crabgrass, 3 to 5 leaf, it works really well. The problem is that more crabgrass germinates afterwards. But if you try to spray it at 1 to 2 tiller, kind of like what it is right now, the control can actually be really, really bad. That's the orange line here. So you see the negative control. I had more crabgrass for having sprayed than I would have if I would have left it alone. That's something that happens to me every year. It kind of gives me, it makes me a little bit nervous when cooperators want me to start a trial controlling crabgrass with quinclorac at this time of the year, because it's like, it's going to be bad news. You need to wait until it's 6 tiller, because then you end up getting the 80% control again, which is, kind of more of the goal. Some other grasses that we're seeing, field paspalum is, just raging, but also there seems to be an uptick in Johnson grass. So Johnson grass versus field paspalum, both of these are exceptionally broadleaf weeds. Johnson grass is the one that's usually like 6 to 8 feet tall and competing with corn, but you can see this in high cut turf. The seed head will tell you the difference. So paspalum, the seed head looks like this. And then Johnson grass has an unusual inflorescence because it has alternating sessile and pedicellate florets. It's called a rain type inflorescence, but the seed head is actually the best way to tell the difference. Regardless, tepramazone is probably the product that you're going to want to end up using for the control of those. Other ones that can have activity on things like goosegrass, foxtails, barnyard grass, etc., are phenoxaprop and mesotrione, but tepramazone is probably the one that I would try first. Just know that for any of the grasses listed on this slide, that quinclorac does nothing to them. Quinclorac is a broadleaf herbicide that happens to have activity on crabgrass. Now, as far as sedges, these are also starting to become quite visible in our landscape. And so Vasagran is still utilized. It's a contact herbicide, so maybe repeat applications might be needed. Sulfentrazone is also quite effective. I find this one works very fast, but maybe is not quite as long-term with its control compared to the group 2 sedge herbicide. So that's Sedgehammer, Solero, or pyrimesulfan, which again, that's been on the market for a couple of years in a granular formulation as Vexus, but Archon is the new liquid formulation of that. So that is active both on sedges and kalingas. We are seeing more false green kalinga here in the state of Ohio. But again, if you're having any weed resistance issues, look at the labels for some of these nut sedge products, because they do have broadleaf weeds on them. And we don't use those for broadleaf weed control on a regular basis because they're not as cost effective as our regular broadleaf herbicides. But if you have a resistance issue, these are the products that I would go for first. So Ed, that was 20 slides. I promised to keep it short, which means that I talk like an auctioneer, but that's what I have for today.
That's all right, Dave. I would buy off you if you were selling anything to me. Dr. Carr.
So this is going to be a little bit of rinse and repeat from last week, since things have not changed a whole lot other than the temperature's hot and it's dry. So I'm seeing more and more and more drought stressed turf as I drive around town. Ed, I'm sure you're seeing some up in the northeastern Ohio areas. If you can't apply irrigation, we may get a rainfall event sometime later this weekend and early next week. If you can apply irrigation, apply it sometime in the morning. You don't want to run it for a really long time because these soils are really dry. And so a lot of that water is just going to run off into the storm drains. If you can apply irrigation, let it soak in, run that irrigation again, we can get better water infiltration and actually make it where the plant can take it up. But looks like temperatures are going to start declining a little bit next week, and hopefully we can get some rain. This is kind of that time of year where less is more. We don't really need to be applying fertilizers. We don't need to mow if your turf is under stress. So just kind of give it a break for a little while. And if you can apply some water, apply some. Don't over apply because that can lead to some insect or just pest management increases. So anything you guys want to add in terms of the heat? I know Dave talked about not applying herbicides.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of conflicted there a little bit because I was like, don't spray anything. And then I was like, here, for crabgrass, use this, for nutsedge, use this. But again, the same rules apply that you want the weather conditions to be ideal. You want the growing conditions of the turf to be ideal. So applying to drought stressed weeds or in dry conditions, the products are just not going to work as well as they should. And so next week, it's supposed to be a little bit cooler, highs in the mid 80s, and we're supposed to get rain on Sunday and Wednesday. So, the conditions should become more favorable to make these applications. To put it another way, we don't usually have strings of 90-degree days as long as we are. So I don't expect this to, maybe still be doing this when we have this conversation a week from today. That would be kind of historically unusual,
Yeah.
But yeah, I would try to delay in as much as possible until we have more ideal conditions.
And I will add that most of the grasses that we have in lawns, especially if they're older lawns, are going to be Kentucky bluegrass. And part of their drought resistance mechanism is going into dormancy early. Doesn't mean they're dead, just means they're dormant. We get some rain, or you get some, like, let's say it's going dormant right now. It's almost white. You apply water to it, it's going to take it a little bit of time to start recovering, but that doesn't mean that you just need to keep hammering it with water. If it gets plenty of water in the system on occasion, and that soil has enough moisture, adding more water is not going to help it. It just takes a little bit of time for it to recover, especially once we get some cooler temperatures.
Yeah, I feel like that's a conversation that we should have had today. I'm using pictures. Maybe I could do that next week. But it's like tan grass is dormant, gray grass is dead, like to the crown.
Mhm.
So being able to recognize the difference, because every now and again, if it's the space between the sidewalk and the street, it's like a rescue application. Even syringing some water to restore the balance is not a bad idea to try to keep things alive. But also that conversation about most people's sprinklers deliver an inch of water per hour, and our soils are capable of taking up about 8/100ths of that, which means that 92% of what they apply is running off into that space between the edge of the lawn and the sidewalk. So, you water for an hour, your rain gauge says you have an inch, you put a pocket knife into the soil and it's powder dry 1 inch down. It's all about the infiltration capacity, but we can talk about that next week too.
And hopefully Mother Nature helps us out a little bit.
Hopefully.
I would like to add to Dr. Carr's comments that another reason for not overwatering your lawn is that if you if your soil gets too moist and you're attracting the Japanese beetles to lay eggs because they have the preference of moist soil to lay eggs, encourage the survival of the eggs and the hatching rates. So another thing to add on.
Good point.
Thank you.
I always recommend that as a cultural insect control practice. Just let your lawn die and the bugs will go away.
Yeah, there's
Thanks,
less labor
Dr.
involved in that too. You don't have to mow it anymore. You just have to reseed in the fall.
Thanks, Dr. Gardner. All right, a couple of things to follow up on in regards to the moisture. So Dr. Shatner or Dr. Carr mentioned the timing, and we cannot emphasize this enough. You water at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, particularly your lawn. Now, not the nursery, landscape beds, things like that, but your lawn, you're increasing the window of time for moisture sitting on leaf surface. In these temperatures, you may run into problems with pythium and some of the more intense type diseases. But because we're running into such extreme situations, the one other thing that popped up this week was slime mold. That one is kind of a interesting pathogen in the sense that it doesn't do any damage to our turf, but it is the one that kind of looks coolest as far as the pictures and images. So if you do see this, and it may have some odd colors, yellows, pinks are not unheard of, along with the gray color, that one is actually of limited concern. There is a fact sheet, the Ohio Line fact sheet number 3074 is available for your perusal on it. It's the other ones such as brown patch and pythium that I would be more concerned about, depending on the species of grass that you've had come in. For those of you worried about grey leaf spot, I don't believe we've seen anything yet. It's usually later in the year, but these temperatures would be conducive to it. So managing water will be one of the critical things this week. Going back to doing as little as possible on the lawns. A couple of the people in the neighborhood around where I am mowed the grass last Sunday. Why they did this, I don't know. But they're probably not going to need to mow again until probably the middle of August, the way it looks right now. Other things I've noticed along with this, tracking of equipment across lawns. Be very, very careful with the timing of putting equipment on grass, particularly in the latter part of the day. If it has been one of these hot days, you're going to see that again for a while after the fact. So it's one of these, again, like we said last week, sit back, pina colada, do nothing, and you're going to do more for your lawn than anything else. If there are rough edges to it, by all means, put the weed whacker along the sides and trim back some of the high cut stuff if you need to do it. The one thing that you also should not do this week going forward is do anything on the tree lawn, particularly where it's in contact with the asphalt or close to the road surface. You're really going to knock the hell out of it. And even if it does look a little bit raggedy, tell your homeowner association people to take a long walk or for short period, because it's going to cause more problems if you do anything to it. Green lawn doing nothing is going to be a lot better than brown doing nothing for the rest of the year. And trying to reestablish, if you do end up killing grass at this time of year, is obviously not what we want to see happening. That is going to be something that would then have to wait until the end of August into early September. All right, is there any more profound statements that we need to make before we wrap it up?
Yeah,
Yes,
I want to talk. We had an email come in about irrigation timing in the morning, and it, we talk about watering in the morning to reduce the leaf wetness period. This time of year, if you can, I'd like to see irrigation done by 9 o'clock in the morning or so. And so it really depends on how long it takes for you to irrigate your whole area for when you start. So if that means 4 o'clock in the morning, that means 4 o'clock in the morning. The sun's coming up, before 6 o'clock around here. So a 4 o'clock irrigation start's not uncalled for. But if your irrigation only takes an hour to run, start at 5:30 or 6. And you should be okay. We want to be done before you get a lot of that heat, and then wind starts picking up. things like that.
All right, thank you, folks. And one other thing to remind you of, if you're on the homeowner end of it and you're looking at some of those pesticide products that Dr. Gardner's mentioned, please reach out to us before purchasing, and also be aware of the licensing requirement. It may be that some of these materials do require professionals, and if you decide to circumvent that, then we are absolutely not taking any responsibility for your carelessness. With that, the website buckeyeturf.osu.edu is all of our information up there, research, articles on a variety of situations. If you need to email us, as some people have this week, buckeyeturf@osu.edu, and then the various social media handles along with the podcast, Turf Team Times. We will thank you for your time, and we will see you all next week, folks. Again, stay safe, make sure that you're staying hydrated, and anybody that's working for you is suitably protected as well, and getting appropriate breaks from the weather when it's getting that hot. Talk to you all soon.